Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Daniel Lennartson, a certified consulting meteorologist with DTN. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you, Brittany.
Earlier this week, a passenger died and several others were injured after a Singapore Airlines flight experienced extreme turbulence. Obviously, this is really heartbreaking to hear. It's also very scary if you are someone who does travel via plane. I am curious, though, how does turbulence go from an inconvenience that some experience on a flight to something that causes injury and, in this case, was deadly?
Well, there's different grades of turbulence from different physical forces. One of those is thunderstorms can be a very extreme case, and others are, let's say, clear air turbulence, and those are more from disturbed flow, large-scale flow, but also clear air turbulence can also be associated with areas of deep thunderstorms, because when you have a strong updraft that causes these thunderstorms, it disturbs the flow, and some of these flows can be in layers. Some of the layers in the atmosphere are more stable than others. So when you rip through all those layers, the stable layers, like when I'm talking about stable, that means if you push it up or push it down, it's going to have a restoring force. It's going to bring it back. So if you disturb that flow, it's going to emanate. Kind of similar to like if you ever stir a water in a bucket, and then you move that circulation, you see waves emanating from that flow. The atmosphere works the same way. It's compressible instead of incompressible like water, but it works the similar way. So in a case like a plane going in even nearby a thunderstorm complex can be affected, even though they think it's coming out of thin air because they're not going through the cloud. But depending on that layer, they can emanate farther or shorter away from that thunderstorm complex, depending on the environment.
Clean air turbulence is the most dangerous type of turbulence. Can you talk about why?
Well, as I mentioned, it looks like it's coming out of nowhere because you're not going through a cloud. All of a sudden, bang, it hits you. It's invisible. It's kind of like waves in the water, except for water you can see it, air you cannot. Sometimes you can see it in like a cirrus deck. If you look on a nice day, you'll see wave patterns in the clouds. That's a gravity wave. So, and air. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So anyway, if a plane went through those areas where there's waves, they might get a little bit of turbulence from that, and that's about the only way you would see it. And clouds look different from where you are in a cockpit versus when you're seeing it from the ground. So there's that too.
So is there any way for a pilot to see this before they're in it, or is it just a sort of freak accident because it is essentially invisible?
There actually you cannot see it with the naked eye, but there is guidance. There's ways that we can forecast it that have very reasonable quality that can depict what could happen. It predicts, like I mentioned, the stability of the layers. The numerical models predict that, and then we apply algorithms to those known algorithms that work, that predict the intensity of that turbulence, depending on what that flow and the stability is like. So on some of these things that can happen is like shear is one very high probability of causing a turbulence. It basically makes wave. You ever see whitecaps on water? It's kind of like breaking waves. So the atmosphere works the same, except for you can't see them in the atmosphere. So that's where you really have to rely on these very sophisticated numerical weather models. There's several of them the United States has, ECMWF from Europe. They're very high quality, and if you can predict what the atmospheric conditions are like, you have a great chance of predicting where that turbulence may occur.
And usually when a pilot finds him or herself in this type of turbulence, is there any indication of how long the average is that it usually lasts, or does it just depend?
Oh, sure. You with these forecasts, you can actually plan. There's two levels. There's one of them is the planning, so you can look ahead of the time and plot your course so that you avoid the turbulence, or tactical. And this is some kind of a nowcast product that is piped right to the cockpit that maybe the pilots can react.
I want to talk about a 2023 study from the AGU, which found severe turbulence occurrences skyrocketed by 55% between 1979 and 2020 in the North Atlantic. And it's predicted that turbulence will only continue to get worse. Do you have any indication of why that is?
Well, some say the global warming is some of the cause to that, and to this end, it is true is that it more or less amplifies the flow. If you look in some of the articles, amplified flow means more disturbed airflow. So if you got a straight line airflow, you're less apt to get turbulence. If you got a lot of undulating airflow, that's where you get into areas where you can have increased turbulence, especially if they're in common air routes that go across the North Atlantic, North Pacific, etc. So that's some of the things you can find. Others, you maybe on the number of thunderstorms, that kind of thing could amplify. Those types of things we're watching as we go through this climate crisis of sorts, where that still has got to be really quantified on how much those are affecting our air routes, because you get maybe an increase in thunderstorms, you got increase in the sea surface temperature from the warming. We've seen that in statistics. That actually generates more thunderstorms in the tropics in particular. So especially those tropical flights, those can particularly get affected. But also on the vigorousness of some of those convective storms in the Midwest or in the middle latitudes from the vigorous flow. So if you've got more vigorous airflow patterns in those long wave digging in, they can make more intense storms, which could then also cause more issues and more potential for severe turbulence than in the past.
That's really interesting. Are there areas throughout the country where you're more likely to experience turbulence than others?
Let's see. Well, there's places that are favored for downstream of what they call places of cyclogenesis. Like, for instance, cyclogenesis means that it's an area where low pressures tend to form. Some of these areas in the United States are like we call Colorado lows, come off the Rockies. You shrink, or you stretch out the air mass, and that causes a spin. So if you come out across the Rocky Mountains and you stretch it out, another place is like Alberta, any place that's downstream of that large mountain ranges. There's other places in the world that also have these areas. But if those become more vigorous because of the airflow, more vigorous troughing and all that, those can also get stronger and cause more severe turbulence.
I think that if anyone's been on a flight or more than one, you've probably experienced some sort of turbulence. But when you hear about people dying from turbulence, people being severely injured, I am curious if you have any tips as a meteorologist that what passengers can do to mitigate injury here, especially from severe turbulence.
The easiest way is, no matter what the little sign there and the light is or keep clicking on your seatbelt, just keep it on. If you're in your seat, click it on, keep it on, unless you go to the bathroom or something like that. That's your best way, bar none.
And as a meteorologist, like I said, is there anything that you think is missing from this conversation when it comes to turbulence, when it comes to safety?
Well, I think the numerical models and the turbulence forecasting is one way that we can really, if we can leverage that, optimize that to the extreme where it can be, I think we can route flights that are in much safer places, and I think that's definitely a place that we can start, despite all the other simple stuff that we can do, like making sure that seatbelt is clicked.
So everyone,
sorry, one more thing. is the technology that the pilots have, like using iPads and things like that, are also improving significantly, and have the bandwidth to pull in the data that is required to make these like tactical choices, like I mentioned earlier, where they can get information about, hey, there's turbulence in my flight path. I need to divert, or even divert to an alternate airport to land, even if they're impeded to their destination airport.
So everyone, make sure to wear those seatbelts the entire flight. Daniel Lennartson, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you, Brittany.